Socioeconomic student achievement gap. The American Psychological Association identifies socioeconomic status as a combination of education, income, and occupation. It's commonly seen as the social standing of an individual or a group of people. When looking at it through the social standing point of view, privilege, power, and control are usually at the forefront. Low socioeconomic standing shows inequities to the access as well as distribution of resources. The socioeconomic status student achievement gap is one of the inequities that the American Psychological Association sees in education. Richard Rothstein says, "It will always be the case that on average, lower class children will achieve at lower levels than children from higher social classes. This is true in every industrialized country." The American Psychological Association states, "Research indicates that school conditions contribute more to SES differences in learning rates than family characteristics." So what are some of these school factors? Well, schools that are in low SES communities, number of years a teacher has been teaching, the quality of teacher preparation programs. Children in low-income schools are less likely to have well-qualified teachers, and well-qualified teachers are less likely to stay in those low-income schools. We also had the Brown versus Board of Education impact, and that was where we had racial segregation in the schools. We also have the Head Start program. This is a program that helps children from low-income families get prepared for school. Head Start helps support the mental, social, and emotional development of children from birth to age 5. They also help the families with health, nutrition, and then social and other types of services. Then we can't forget the No Child Left Behind Act. Well, in the 1970s and 1980s, we were seeing the education achievement gap close. In the 1990s, it began to get greater again. And so President George Bush enacted the No Child Left Behind Act in 2002. This came from decades of education reform, where we looked at things like the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. We had the Reagan administration had the report that was entitled A Nation at Risk, and then Clinton's administration had the Goals 2000. So all of these were come into place just so that we could try to narrow that achievement gap. So there are some out-of-school factors as well, some of those being home environment, the literacy ability of the parents, family stresses like unemployment, health and nutritional situations, what kind of nutrition are the kids getting, housing, are they in affordable housing, are the students moving a lot? When students move, they tend to miss learning opportunities and they spend less time in school. And then also personal experiences. What kind of life experiences have these students been exposed to? They don't get the experiences of traveling, visiting museums or zoos, participating in music or dance lessons, or even participating in organized sports. And these experiences all help nurture ambition, cultural awareness, and most importantly, self-confidence with the students. On the health and nutrition side, Tanner and Finn stated, "For the brain to develop normally, certain factors must be present, including the availability of oxygen, protein, energy, and micronutrients, as well as after birth, sensory stimulation, activity, and social interaction. Because of the unavailability of some or many of these variables in a poor child's development, brain development may be stunted. The lack of adequate nutrition and health care for poor pregnant women has shown to result in poor birth outcomes, later resulting in cognitive delays." The American Psychological Association believes that by improving our school systems as well as increasing the amount of early intervention programs, it may help in reducing the risk factors of the low SES student populations that are in our schools, and may help in closing the achievement gap. For the field activity, I gathered academic data on 23 elementary schools in a school district in Utah. The data collected is from the 2013 end-of-year criterion referenced testing. The data is from grades 3 through 5 in the subjects of language arts, mathematics, and science. The data was retrieved from the Cognos Databank, which is stored on the Utah State Office of Education website. Now, when looking at the data from all 23 of these schools, there were some interesting findings. First, 8 of the 23 schools had higher than average difference between the low SES and non-SES students in language arts. Second, 9 of the 23 schools had higher than average differences in mathematics, again with the low SES and non-SES students. Also, 11 of the 23 schools had higher than average difference between low SES and non-SES students in science. And lastly, 9 of the 23 schools had the difference between the low SES and non-SES be greater than the average in at least 2 of the subject areas. The first graph that we're seeing here is the language arts graph. The yellow bar graph is the non-low SES students. The green graph is for those that did qualify as low SES students. You'll notice some great discrepancies there. There are a few schools, such as school number 4, school number 6, where the differences are not as great as compared to schools like, say, school number 7, with great disparities. This is the math graph. Again, the yellow bar is for the non-low SES students, and the green bar is for the low SES students. Again, you'll notice the achievement gaps in the mathematics achievement scores or proficiency scores. Again, there are several schools that do have close scores, but there still is a gap in there. These are the science scores. Again, the yellow graph or the yellow bar is for the non-low SES students, and the green is for the low SES students. Once again, you'll see some great disparities or a great gap with the schools, such as school number 7. There is a large gap between the low SES and the non-SES students, but I do want to note that school number 7 is at 86% low SES status, and so 86%, 504 out of 586 students are low SES. However, notate also that on the flip side of that, those that are not low SES scored 100%. 100% of them are proficient on the science exam. And then you have other schools like school number 3, school number 4 came very, very close. Those gaps are smaller gaps. That's what we want to see. So the results are in. Basically, what we end up noticing is that 5 of the 12 Title I schools did achieve higher than the average proficiency levels with the low SES population. And this allows me to draw a conclusion that it is indeed possible for the low SES populations to be high achieving and close in on that achievement gap. Matthew Lynch identifies some key things that need to be done in order to close the socioeconomic achievement gap in education. He says, first of all, we have to recognize that there is a gap, and that is a problem. We also need to make sure that we seek out some focused efforts on reducing that achievement gap, and we need to be relentless when we are looking out for those focused efforts. Schools are also coming and having professional learning communities. This is where they are collaborating in teams to find out what's the best learning for the students and come up with strategies to improve student learning. Title I funding are the funds that schools receive once they are classified as a Title I school. That's the funds that they receive to be able to use for things like technology, paraprofessionals, teachers, smaller class sizes, support materials, professional development, or even after-school programs. All of these are the factors that we use to attempt at closing that achievement gap.